Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're digging into something I think a lot of you developers out there will recognize. That moment when your trusty, super customized tool starts feeling, well, maybe more like a burden.
Yeah, it's that friction point, right? We're looking at a really interesting case today. Someone moving from a Vim setup they'd used since 2019. A big jump to Neovim and LazyVim in early 2025.
And it wasn't just any Vim setup. We're talking, what, a 700-line config file? More than 55 plugins? That's deep entrenchment.
Exactly. So the mission here for you listening is to really get why someone with that much invested would decide, okay, time for a change. And maybe more importantly, how they pulled it off without just getting lost in the weeds.
Right, so let's start there, the breaking point. What finally pushed them over the edge? Their notes say they were done making compromises near the end of 2024.
Yeah, and compromises is the key word. It wasn't just one thing. It was a collection of annoyances, what they called the Vim warts.
Yeah.
These were specific technical pain points.
Okay, lay them out for us. What were these warts?
Well, first up, syntax highlighting. It was getting flaky. You know, you open a file, maybe a newer type or something complex, and boom, half of it's just plain white text. Not great when you need to see structure.
Yeah, kind of defeats the purpose of a code editor, so basic reliability issues.
Precisely. And tied to that, inconsistent auto-formatting. Things just weren't lining up correctly all the time, especially in common file types. Plus, fixing these things, that was a whole other headache.
Let me guess. Vim script?
You got it. The user was really reluctant to dive deep into Vim script just to fix some old plugin or tweak a setting. It felt like a huge time sink for diminishing returns. They felt kind of walled off from improving their own setup.
Okay, that makes sense. The technical debt was becoming too expensive to pay down. What else? Performance.
Performance was definitely a factor,
Right.
especially jumping around in really large files or opening big CSVs. They mentioned that specifically. The editor would just hang for a bit, which, breaks your flow.
Totally. Anything else technical?
The big one, really, was wanting better support for modern features, specifically language server protocols, LSPs. They wanted that deeper autocomplete, the smarter refactoring tools you get in modern IDEs.
And the old Vim setup just wasn't cutting it there.
It was struggling. Integrating LSPs smoothly was proving difficult with that sprawling, older configuration. They knew they were missing out.
Okay, so those are the hard technical reasons, but you mentioned some softer factors too.
Yeah, definitely. There was a desire to just, shake it up a bit. And importantly, this user had tried things like VS Code before, but really disliked moving away from a terminal-centric workflow.
So Neovim felt like a way to modernize without leaving the terminal behind.
Exactly. Plus, the Neovim community seemed really active. The project was moving in a good direction. It felt less like sticking with a legacy tool and more like joining something, current.
Right, moving from something maybe feeling a bit isolated to something community-backed. Okay, so that sets the stage for the switch. Let's get into section 2, the game plan. How do you actually tackle moving off a 700-line, 55-plugin beast?
Yeah, that's the daunting part, isn't it? Starting with a totally blank Neovim config, needing to learn Lua scripting from scratch. It sounds like weeks of pain just to get back to where you were.
So what was the shortcut? How did they avoid that?
The answer, which kept popping up in recommendations apparently, was LazyVim.
Okay, LazyVim. Explain that for us. Is it just like a pre-made config file, or is it more...
It's more of a framework, really. Yeah. Think of Neovim as the powerful engine. LazyVim is like a well-designed car built around that engine. It provides an opinionated but still customizable structure. It handles a lot of the tricky setup, plugin management, all in Lua, so you don't have to figure it all out from zero.
Okay, so it gives you a massive head start with sensible defaults. That makes sense. But they didn't just jump right in, did they? There was a clever testing phase.
Yes, and this is super smart for anyone thinking about a big migration like this. They used Docker. They spun up the entire LazyVim environment inside a container first.
Why Docker?
Low risk. It let them try everything out, kick the tires, make sure it was actually better, before installing a single new dependency or Lua tool onto their main development machine. They wanted proof it was an improvement, not just a sideways move.
That's a really solid approach. Confirm value before committing. Okay, so they decided LazyVim was the way forward. What was the next step? Dealing with that old config.
Yep. Time for what they called a ruthless audit. Going through that 700-line Vim file, line by line, plugin by plugin, asking, do I actually still use this? Is this even necessary anymore?
And what did they find during that audit?
This was, I think, pretty surprising even to them. They realized they could ditch most of the old plugins. Maybe half of those 55 were just obsolete.
Obsolete how?
Well, partly because Neovim itself now has features built in that used to require plugins in Vim. Things like better asynchronous operations, improved terminal integration, stuff like that.
So they were carrying around plugins for features that the core editor now just did.
Exactly. Paying a maintenance tax for nothing. But the biggest win, the most dramatic reduction, came from one specific piece of tech related to syntax highlighting,
Okay, what was that?
Treesitter. By adopting Treesitter, which LazyVim uses heavily, they were able to remove, get this, 95% of their old syntax-reloaded plugins.
95%. Wow. Okay, what does Treesitter do differently than the old Vim way?
So the old Vim approach mostly relied on regular expressions, complex patterns trying to match text. It could be slow, and it often broke, especially with nested code or tricky syntax you find in, say, Ruby or complex JSON.
Right. Fragile.
Very.
Yeah.
Treesitter, on the other hand, actually parses the code. It builds an understanding of the code's structure, not just the text patterns. It's way faster, much more accurate, and handles tons of languages, Python, Ruby, Bash, config files, all consistently with one core mechanism.
Ah, okay. So one powerful structural approach replaces dozens of brittle pattern-matching plugins. That explains the massive cleanup.
Totally. And since they were effectively starting fresh with LazyVim as the base, it was also a perfect chance to tidy everything else up. Make key mappings more logical and consistent, prune out unused settings, just general housekeeping.
A clean slate, but with a good foundation already laid. What about the language barrier? They didn't know Lua, right? How did that go?
Apparently, it was surprisingly okay. They mentioned having general programming experience made Lua feel quite approachable. It's known for being pretty readable. If they hit a snag, a quick search usually sorted it out.
So the fear of learning a whole new language for configuration was maybe overblown?
It seems so. You're not writing complex applications in Lua, mostly just declarative configuration. Setting options, listing plugins, it's manageable.
Okay, this is making sense. But to really understand the new setup, we probably need to define the key pieces a bit more clearly. We've got Neovim, the editor engine. We've got LazyVim, the configuration framework. What else is crucial?
Right, let's map out the ecosystem. First, how plugins are managed. That's handled by Lazy. It's the package manager specifically for Neovim plugins, including LazyVim itself.
Okay, so Lazy manages the Neovim plugins. What about all those modern tools like linters and formatters, the LSP stuff?
For that, there's another key player, Mason. Think of Mason as the dedicated package manager for the developer tooling ecosystem that surrounds Neovim.
So Mason installs things like linters, formatters, the language servers themselves.
Exactly. It handles installing and managing tools like, say, shellcheck for Bash scripts, Rough for Python code style, and all the different LSP servers that give you that intelligent code completion and analysis. Mason makes getting that whole toolchain set up way, way easier than it used to be.
Gotcha. So Neovim, LazyVim, Lazy for plugins, Mason for tools. What about Treesitter? We mentioned that already.
Right. Treesitter is that core syntax parsing engine we talked about. Handles the fast, accurate highlighting for pretty much everything. Python, Ruby, Bash, you name it. A huge upgrade.
Okay. And then there's the user experience stuff, making it feel modern, competitive with graphical editors. The user mentioned snacks.
Yeah, snacks seems to be their term for a collection of essential quality-of-life plugins that LazyVim often includes or makes easy to add. Things like a fuzzy finder, often telescope for quickly opening files or searching text.
Like Sepral plus P in other editors.
Kinda, yeah, but often more powerful. And things like a file explorer sidebar, maybe InVim tree for navigating your project. Split terminals integrated right into the editor. These are the bits that make a terminal editor feel slick and modern.
Right, bridging the gap with graphical IDEs. And the final piece for that smart feeling, the autocomplete.
That's typically handled by a completion plugin. The user mentioned blank in their notes, which is one popular option. It's the component that takes information from the LSPs, from your own code snippets from Treesitter, and presents those intelligent completion suggestions as you type.
Okay, so Blink ties the LSPs and snippets together for that instant feedback. Phew, that's quite an ecosystem, but it sounds powerful when it works together.
It really is. It addresses pretty much all the pain points they had with the old Vim setup.
But it sounds almost too good. The user's notes did mention one point of uneasiness, a trade-off.
Yeah, there's always a trade-off, isn't there?
Yeah.
The main one here is the reliance, in some cases, on single maintainers. LazyVim itself and many of these excellent plugins are often primarily developed and maintained by just one person.
The bus factor problem, essentially. What's the risk there?
The risk is that if that key maintainer gets busy, takes a break for a few months, or steps away, well, development on that component might stall. Or worse, updates to Neovim itself or other plugins might break compatibility, and fixes might be slow to arrive. You might find yourself holding back on updates.
Okay, so you gain this amazing integrated system, but parts of it might depend on the availability of just one or two people. How did the user feel about mitigating that risk?
Well, the mitigation comes from the community, really, because LazyVim and its popular plugins are so widely used. When something does break or an incompatibility pops up.
Someone else often jumps in.
Exactly. Workarounds, patches, or pull requests tend to appear pretty quickly, sometimes within hours, usually within a day or two. That's the big advantage of using a popular, established framework.
Right.
You're rarely the only one facing the problem.
So the community acts as a kind of safety net. Is there any technical control too?
Yes, definitely. Lazy, the package manager, makes it really straightforward to pin a plugin to a specific version or commit.
So if a new update breaks something, you can just tell Lazy, hey, keep this plugin at the version that worked while letting everything else update.
Precisely. It gives you control. You can hold back a problematic plugin temporarily, wait for a fix, and then unpin it later. It's a good way to manage that single maintainer dependency risk when you need to.
Okay, that sounds like a practical solution. So wrapping this up, what was the final verdict from the user? Was the massive switch worth it?
Overwhelmingly positive, it seems. They describe themselves as very happy with the new Neovim and LazyVim setup. And the proof is really in the deployment. They managed to integrate this entire new configuration into their existing .files install script. That one script now sets up their complete development environment editor included consistently across Arch Linux, Debian, Ubuntu, even under WSL2 on Windows and macOS.
Wow, so they achieve not just a better editor experience, but also better portability and automation for their entire setup. That's a huge win.
A huge win. Performance, features, maintainability, and deployment consistency all improved.
Okay, so the big takeaway here for you, the listener, especially if you're sitting on years of your own custom config, seems clear. This wasn't just about swapping editor A for editor B.
Not at all. It was about strategically using a modern, opinionated framework, LazyVim in this case, to leapfrog years of manual configuration and maintenance. That framework was the key to shedding that massive, brittle 700-line script.
And achieving that incredible 95% reduction in syntax plugins just by adopting Treesitter via the framework. It's about leveraging community effort and modern architecture.
Trading maybe a little bit of absolute fine-grained control for vastly improved sustainability and capability.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to chew on. Think about this user's journey. Their biggest obstacle wasn't really learning Lua or getting used to Neovim's differences. It was the sheer inertia, the weight of that legacy configuration.
Right. So if adopting a well-documented, community-vetted, opinionated framework like LazyVim let this experienced developer instantly bypass hundreds of lines of custom fragile scripting, does this represent a broader trend? Could this approach, choosing robust frameworks over building everything from scratch, be the future for how we efficiently adopt and manage complex tools well beyond just text editors?
Something to consider the next time you look at your own carefully crafted but perhaps slightly creaky digital toolkit.
Absolutely. Thanks for tuning in to this deep dive.
We'll catch you on the next one.